Hi again, VCE students. We're looking at types of experimental research design in this video. Studies can be constructed in different ways. One way in which studies can differ is what conditions participants are exposed to and how they are allocated to those groups. There are three distinct experimental research designs to look at: independent groups, matched participants, and repeated measures. In an independent group's experimental research design, the participants are divided into two distinct groups: the control group and the experimental group. Those in the control group experience the control condition, whilst those in the experimental group experience the experimental condition. An independent group's design is fairly easy to set up, because the participants are just randomly allocated into two groups. However, this makes the design rather vulnerable to participant effects. Then we have the matched participants experimental research design. Matched participants takes a little longer because it requires some testing before the actual experiment begins. Sometimes a particular extraneous variable might render the study fruitless unless it is accounted for. For example, the experimenter might want to counter natural intelligence. To do this, they conduct tests before the experiment, an IQ test for example, and then pair the participants based on their results. The two participants with the highest results on the IQ test are paired, and then the next best two, and so on. One member of each pair is then allocated to the control group and the other is allocated to the experimental group. Finally, there is the repeated measures experimental research design. In repeated measures, all participants are exposed to both research conditions. This means that participant effects are eliminated because the same people are exposed to the experimental condition and the research condition. But on the other hand, it makes order effects quite likely. Consider this question from the 2013 VCEE exam. The question asks about the experimental design in the provided case study. The case study saw participants who selected an odd number from a hat allocated to the control group, whilst participants who selected an even number from the same hat were allocated to the experimental group. So there are two groups here, the experimental group and the control group. That rules out the two options with repeated measures, because there are no distinct groups in repeated measures. That just leaves options C and D. As the participants had an equal chance of being allocated to either the control or the experimental group, it seems then that the answer here is option D, an independent groups design with random allocation. Keep working hard and I'll catch you next time.